but also because I wanted to be able to communicate to Jews in their...
and missionize.
Yes, I didn't call it that, though.
What did you call it?
Well, I called it bringing them home.
Right, that was your belief.
Because for me, a Jew to believe in JC was to be fulfilled. One of the things I learned when I went to Bible college, and by the way, I should mention, I did go back to a college program. I finished my high school education and went on to college. I actually went to 6 different colleges. I could not write. It's funny today because I'm published. But at that stage, I just couldn't put 5 thoughts, 3 thoughts, 2 thoughts together with any cohesion or continuity. I didn't have the skills. But through difficulty and that 4-letter word called fail, I learned to do things differently. That's another story in itself. When I went to Bible college, they taught me 2 very baseline ideas about how I should live my life. One, they said, JC is supposed to come back. But before he does, the message of this salvation to all the world, that God sent his son into the world to die, be the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate kapara for all the sins of the world, past, present, future. And if you believe him, you receive a new life. There's nothing you could do by your deeds that will ever satisfy the righteous standards of God. God gave the law, what's called the Torah, in order to prove that we could never keep it. And then he sent JC to be the one who would be the one who would fulfill all the law and then take the penalty for our failure to keep the law. That's Christian message in a nutshell. Okay, so all you get is belief. We would say chaparein on his tzidkus. And it's a nice message.
Mm-hmm. It's cute. It's a nice story.
Well, it requires very little.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be like you going before the traffic court judge and he says, you know what, guys, just drive lovingly. If you drive lovingly, you'll naturally fulfill all the traffic laws. Gee, that's great.
Yeah.
But it said, don't turn right. That's red light there. No, don't, just be loving, you know. Oh, it's okay. My son paid the penalty for your traffic violation.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of how it looks like. The other thing besides proclaiming to all the world this message that salvation had come 2,000 years ago and everybody needed to hear it so they could escape, hell, was that the Jewish people from whom the initial message had sprung had to come back in large numbers to believe it. Now, for most of Christian history, for Jews to believe in JC meant forsaking everything about themselves that was Jewish. It meant essentially becoming a goy.
Yeah.
No mezuzah, no Shabbos, no kashrus, none of that. But about 50 years ago, somebody came up with a brilliant marketing idea. Said, wait a minute, JC was Jewish. The original disciples were Jewish. So Swedish Christians like their heritage, Chinese Christians like their heritage here in America, Jewish Americans could hold on to their culture and also believe in JC at the same time. Because after all, JC is the Jewish Messiah. What's more Jewish than believing in the Jewish Messiah, right? So the founder of a group called Jews for Jesus started this messaging. Now, they are the best known of all the different Messianic groups, but the least, let's say, Jewish in terms of their cultural heritage. From their beginnings back in the late 60s, early 70s, today in America we have over 450, North America, over 450 Messianic congregations. When I was a missionary in Israel, which maybe we'll get to that, there were about 35 congregations, maybe 3,000 to 5,000 what we call Jewish believers. Today there's over about 30,000 and some 200 congregations.
That are Jewish.
Yeah.
They're Jewish.
Israeli, yeah.
And they're
Hebrew speaking.
And they were pulled in.
Yeah. So, interestingly, nearly all of them come from Chiluni backgrounds. Mm-hmm. They were Jews for nothing. And along this comes. So, I believed that the Jewish people also, prior to the return of JC, prior to this cataclysm that was going to come on the world, had to come to believe in him, and I wanted to be part of that.
So you wanted to go ahead and start converting as many Jews as possible to believe this?
Well, the Christian scriptures, what we call I call them today the not so New Testament, because what's true isn't new and what's new isn't true. That's a quote from Tovia Singer, my good buddy.
You're good buddy now, but I'm sure you guys.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting the groups that I didn't like back then, like Yad Lachem. I've probably spoken dozens of times for Yad Lachem to help them along the way. It's fun. don't make plans.
Yeah,
or,
right.
Or at least don't tell God; He'll laugh at you. So, the life path that it's just so unexpected because I remember going to my pastor, my leader in the church I was part of. I was part of a very large church in Southern California.
How large?
Well, when I started, there were 800 people. He had started with 18. I got there were 800. When I left, there were 10,000.
10,000 people part of this church.
Right, exactly. And then it swelled to about 12,000. It was a big. There were a few mega churches that's springing up around the West Coast in those days. Calvary Chapel was one of them, which went on to become a denomination unto itself. And I was part of a similar type of group that all of these Pentecostal groups had sprung out of a serious revival in the early 1900s, Azusa Street revival. And there was a major Pentecostal revival that sprung out of a place called Azusa Street in downtown Los Angeles. I think it was 1904. And from that come the groups like Assemblies of God and Foursquare and a host of other groups that in those days were backwater, other side of the track kinds of denominations. Today they're front and center. Right. They've really replaced what we used to call the mainstreams, like the Lutherans and the Episcopalians.
A lot going on. Momo, you're from LA. I'm glad you turned out religious Orthodox.
Yeah, dude.
You didn't...
How long did this stage of your life last?
So I was in Christianity for about 20 years.
Wow.
That included going to Israel for a total of 4. First as a student of the Hebrew Bible, first Hebrew language, because I was a student of the Hebrew Bible. I wanted to learn Hebrew for my own biblical studies, but also because I wanted to be able to communicate to Jews in their...
and missionize.
Yes, I didn't call it that, though.
What did you call it?
Well, I called it bringing them home.
Right, that was your belief.
Because for me, a Jew to believe in JC was to be fulfilled, was to be completed. And the Christian scriptures talk a fair bit about this. The one who wrote most of the New Testament, named Paul, puts a priority on to the Jew first. And you see that today in that groups like Jews for Judaism, Rabbi Kravitz and Rabbi Skobach and others, all today friends of mine. I didn't like them in the early days back, but and those who, by the way, counter this effort to reach Jews for Christianity, especially in the Messianic garb, it's a small group of professionals, and I don't know if I put myself in that category, but we all know each other. Everybody knows everybody, and it's like this collective little David Hamelech against this Goliath of
it's like an old
hundreds
school
of
battle,
millions of dollars that are invested every year to reach Jews. The money behind it is unbelievable.
It's crazy. I was recently watching something with my wife, which was on Netflix, and at the end of this movie, I'm like, whoa, this was paid for by the church. Like this was it's like Hollywood. A lot of the films that come out of Hollywood are funded by church, and they have different, scenes and messages throughout these movies that try to cop people, whether it's a moment of prayer from one of the actors and it happens to be Christian, and it's just like, it's so subtle, but it's...
Kirk Cameron is a good case in point. Back in the day, someone that was part of our church was Pat Boone, the singer, who is... he's in his 80s now, but he was in the 50s. He was like a big pop singer, 50s and 60s, and he and his family were part of the congregation I was part of. We had a lot of Hollywood people there. I won't name drop, but there were quite a few. That's people in my age band and a little younger would remember. So especially in the singing world, one in particular I will name drop was a guy named Barry McGuire, who was very famous, who wrote the song "Eve of Destruction," and that was popular in my...
It's your favorite song, no?
So
it's my go-to karaoke song.
Is it? But
No.
Barry became a believer in JC also, and then took all that energy and fame and recognition that he had, and became well known as a Christian singer. So we've had different waves of this down through the last 50 years. We're in another one today with the movement known as Christian Zionism and the kind of flip-flop that's happened. I think it's essential, a kind of precursor to anything else, that I say that I went to Israel to study Hebrew because I wanted to communicate. First of all, I wanted my own spiritual life to be enriched by being able to look at the Bible in the original and not the translation. that would be a long process to get there. And then I also want to be able to talk to Israelis, because Christians don't just come to this stam, by the way. They didn't just wake up in the morning and say, we need to reach the Jews. There is a logical foundation to the activity. What is that logical foundation? They say that there's some 300 different prophecies in the Jewish Bible which point to JC, whether it's the virgin birth, whether it's the crucifixion, get it? Whether it's the resurrection, because he was supposedly, died, buried, rose the third day, and a host of other things that are born in Bethlehem, Micah chapter 5, verse 2. So I'd been taught in Bible college these various prophecies, and I'd been also taught that the Jewish people have kind of a partially blind, a condition of blindness on their eyes, that they read the Torah, they read the scriptures, but they don't see these things. And so it was part of the Christian imperative to open their eyes. So I learned all these prophecies. Well, here's where some of the undoing begins. If you can read it in the original and you see that there's disparity between the original and the translation, well, which one do you toss out? The translation.
So in your sort of search to become more religious and learn more, you found discrepancies in what you believed in by learning in Hebrew. Yeah,
there were, and they fell into three categories. And I've heard all of my other friends in this arena, some of whom are BTs and some of whom are converts themselves. The discrepancies are either a mistranslation, something taken out of context, or I think of a couple cases in the first book of the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew, something that's cited, but you don't find it anywhere in Tanakh. It's like, well, how'd that happen? So the history behind all that is its own interesting thing for those who are interested in that. But it's enough to know that as a Christian, I didn't question any of that. I took it at face value.
Even at the time, or you started then?
Well, but once I had the what we call the kalim, once I had the glasses to see differently, it's like somebody takes you out in the night sky and says, there's the Big Dipper. Now try to undo seeing the Big Dipper. You can't. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And so it was the same thing for me in terms of the Hebrew text.
At this time, you're in Israel and you're sort of missionizing. You're trying to get Jews. And first of all, I can imagine Israel is not too fond about that. Or are they like...
No, they're not.
They're not friendly of people coming to Israel to try to convert people to Judaism.
And I never would have said that that's what I was doing, first of all. And it's I have to just kind of insert here that my first time in Israel, I went at two phases. One was as a student, and I actually got kicked out of my first kibbutz for missionary activity. That's a long, complicated story. Won't go down that road.
Congrats.
When I left Israel after that, I was on the blacklist, the infamous, Rishima Shchora from Misrad Panim.
So you couldn't go back?
Right. I came back once, and they caught me at the airport and put me on a plane, sent me back.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's another story. Getting off the blacklist, it took like 9-10 months of hard effort. So I'm back to Israel, and I got a job teaching English at a language school, private language school, Kikar Tzion and Ramla. And then I was asked by a certain Christian group that had Christian groups and scattered around 10 different kibbutzim if I would join their leadership structure, which I did. And part of my task, while we were all volunteers in kibbutz doing our daily stuff 8 hours a day, we had these groups that would have prayer cell and Bible study and what we called worship times, where we get together and sing, and we'd pray for the kibbutzniks, and we'd pray for the land of Israel. And part of my job was to teach these young people that came from all over the world for a year of service how not to share their faith with Israelis, how to do something that we called friendship evangelism. Because we said, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So you need to show people that you're here because you love them. The message here is we're here because we love the Jewish people. And if you talk to any evangelical Christian today, especially those who call themselves Christian Zionists, they'll say, well, the sign of a real Christian is a love for the Jewish people. Real Christians love Jews.
And we see that, it's something that we see here and there. I know Yad Lachem is involved with sort of combating that, where every few years you see that, in this community, someone who seemingly acted like a Jew, lived like a Jew, was sort of integrated in the Jewish community, in fact, was an evangelical Christian.
I'm very aware of that story.
And that's sort of what you're mentioning, that path was be friendly. Don't show them your faith. Don't show them your cards, but integrate.
Right. And the person that you're speaking of in this case, this is the famous Michael L. Cohen, or Michael Elk, is his name. I was involved with a group of other people in that whole process. And he had said that he was really there in Haredi garb, in the role of a Rav, who had studied Kabbalah.
Doing bris
Giving bris milah, writing mezuzahs, and giving smicha, Messianic smicha, to a few shadowy people that we know about. This was like, how did this happen? How did it come to that point? Well, it didn't happen by himself. He was supported by an evangelical group out of North Carolina, North or South Carolina, one of those. And there's more and more of this. I mean, we know there are more people like that. Why would the evangelicals go to that length to embed themselves almost like a cell into the Jewish world? Because they really do believe that JC's coming back and the Jewish people are going to have their eyes open. And Michael Elk said, I want to be there amongst them, connected to them, so I can help them when they get over the shock of what's going to be revealed to them when Messiah comes back. When Messiah comes, and turns out that it's his second time, not his first time.
And you were on that path to sort of doing similar. Yeah. And somewhere along the way, it's sort of like, you mentioned that, man plans and God laughs. It was sort of probably the biggest humbling experience for you when you started realizing like this doesn't add up.
Well, there was a big gap between when I came to the realization and then ultimately left the church. So after several years in Israel, in kibbutz, I left and I was really quite broken. So I went back to the safety of the big church where I came from. But after 2 years, I couldn't do it. One of the things I'd done while I was at the big church again was I went to a counter-missionary rally sponsored by the newly dedicated Chabad house of UCLA. And the three people spoke, including a fiery young rabbi with a red beard named Ben Sion Kravitz, who was also a dear friend today. And these three rabbis, Rabbi Shochet from Toronto, Rabbi Lisbon, and Rabbi Kravitz, laid out the case why everything that I believed and everything that I was doing vis-a-vis reaching Jewish people was, can you say, pure sheker? It really was. It was absolute falsehood. I was a broker of deception, and it just really hit me. And so,
wow. What was their goal in that venue?
So what was the catalyst for even having the meeting in the first place?
Yeah.
So 1984 Olympics, all the world was coming to LA. And so for anybody in the evangelical missionary related world, this was
Super Bowl.
Yeah. It was.
Let's get them.
Mamish was. So there were very sophisticated outreaches in the Jewish community. People going door to door, literature. There were music groups on the street. There was all kinds of efforts to reach the Jews as well. And so the Jewish community said, this ain't happening. So they had this rally. And I was told by the church you got to go check this out. So I did.
And Little did they know.
Oh boy!
They were primarily talking to Jews, presumably.
Yes, but there were
the church was planting you there to get sort of like what are they?
The inside story. What are the Jews up to here?
They lost them.
Wow.
One of the things I did there, they had some literature for sale, including a book by Gerald Siegel, who is an excellent researcher on this area. He got fascinated by it years ago. He's written a number of books on different aspects of Jewish responses to Christian missionary interpretations of the Jewish Bible. So he had one there. It was his first book called The Jew and the Christian Missionary. It was Jewish answers to, and I'd never heard Jewish. I didn't think most of the Jews that I met were, blissfully spiritually illiterate. They might have had a bar mitzvah or whatever, but for the most part,
those are the Jews that you were targeting because
they knew nothing.
They were easy,
right? And so we were able to give them the best of both worlds. I mean, look, what a deal. You can intermarry. You can eat treif. You can, just because JC fulfilled all the mitzvahs for you.
You're just chilling.
You're chilling, chilling with your shrimp cocktail. So
chilling like a villain.
That's it. And yet my eyes progressively opened to, especially I used to sit in my pastoral office in the church and read Jerry Siegel's book. I just go, oh, I don't have an answer for this.
This. I'm just like picturing this image where you're sitting in this church where you have there's 10,000 congregants, and you're questioning everything, and it's just,
you don't want to go there. It was very problematic.
Well, take us back to that rally. Take us back to that experience at that rally, because that's where the seed was planted.
It was one of the, I have a few episodes in my life that I call the wrecking ball hitting the wall of my faith and creating these, first a hairline fracture, like when I got kicked out of the kibbutz for missionary activity, and I started thinking, gee, I wonder, how do I know I'm right? That was the first one. Then there were a series of others. That was a big one, and it was a very energetic rally because there were Christians there. I remember one guy in particular he was Irish. He worked on my Navy or something. And he stood up and talked about how he was a drunken sailor and all this stuff and how he believed and his life was gloriously changed. And I remember Rabbi Shochat Alav Shalom saying, "We're very happy for you that you've had a wonderful life experience and change, but that what you had is for you and not for everybody necessarily." So he gave a very logical, intellectual response. Rabbi Shochat Alav Shalom was also very, very wise in this area. So, and this was my first encounter with
intellectual
informed Jews, educated Jews who really, these were Torah Jews. I had almost zero encounter with that whole community. You see them by the Kotel or, whatever, but I'd never had any sustained experience of their thought stream, what was going on in the mindset. I just thought they were stubborn, and I'm thinking, why would you want to volunteer for martyrdom and all these things when, don't you understand that Christians really love you? I want to pause on that for a moment because there's a story I tell. I was in Israel in 1982 during the Mivtza Shalom HaGalil, which is the Peace for Galilee operation, the first Lebanon war. And a lot of volunteers in kibbutzim just raced out of there. Our Christian group stayed. We were like 92 Christians on kibbutz Dafna of 600 members. That was big news. So it got somehow down to the south to the attention of the Jerusalem Post, and they sent a reporter up, religious reporter, not a religious guy, but a religion reporter. Chaim Shapiro, I think was his name. And I was appointed the spokesman for this group, so they said, go meet him. So we're sitting talking, and he's asking, so who are you people, and why are you here, and why are you staying? Everybody else has left. Why do you feel it's your responsibility to stay with these kibbutzniks? And I gave him the whole spiel that, we are your spiritual brothers. We have been grafted into the tree of your faith, according to the New Testament. We believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We believe in the prophets of the Jewish Bible. We believe in your right to be in the land. And we're here to support that. And we're here to come and demonstrate that by giving a year or more of our life service to help build up the land and to benefit the Jews here in Israel. And, of course, everybody celebrates that kind of messaging. There are various groups in Israel, Ad Hayom Hazeh, that are doing that. And so then he got into the whole issue of what's a valid Christian. And I said to him what I just said to you. The sign of a real Christian is love for Jews. I said, real Christians love Jews. He said, well, I have a little problem with that because when I look at Christian history, I see something very opposed to that. And so I gave him my simple four-word answer, which was, they weren't real Christians. So it's a kind of circular reasoning. If the sign of a real Christian is love for Jews, but somebody didn't love the Jews, then obviously they weren't real Christians. He said, well, I look at it a different way. Now, I don't know if he had a Gemara cup somewhere in the recesses of his yichus.
This is Chaim Shapiro.
This is Chaim Shapiro, right. Totally secular guy. He said, if the sign of a real Christian is a love for Jews, and for most of Christian history, there was not a love for Jews, then I can only conclude that for most of Christian history, there have not been real Christians. Yeah.
The crowd was wild.
So this, again, was my...
that was a wrecking ball to the...
That was one also. But what was happening was I was meeting the Jewish mind. This is these... It doesn't make a difference. The neshama is the neshama. Right? Yeah. So I was meeting these big neshamas that had what to say, and they were delivering messages to me. So the net effect was that in 1986, I left the church world, and I became a goy for nothing for about 8 years.
For how long?
8 years.
8 years, wow.
I wandered. I played peekaboo with God in churches. I'd go in here and whatever. But bottom line, I played around with other spiritual alternatives, looked into this, looked into that. the men's movement, sitting around drumming, holding the truth stick, telling your truth. It's stupid stuff.
Just searching.
Yeah, just kind of back a little bit of hippie regression.
Was there like a moment of like, I imagine that moment where you left the church and you had spent 20 years on this, like of just failure, defeat, of like what is going on here? That emotion that you were going through, like, can you take us through that? Wow,
that's a good intuitive question. Well, it's one thing to be a broker of, I talked about being a broker of deception. For most of the time, I thought I was a broker of certainty, of absolute truth, that there was one way to God. I knew that way. I was going to help you find it in the most loving, reasonable way that I could. Because I don't want you to go to hell.
Right.
Momo, your skin's too fair for that kind of environment. It's not going to work out for you.
Momo can use it for like 30 seconds. Get a little burnt.
Oh, Lila.
So, my motivation was, I thought, out of a real love for people. And all of a sudden, there's this total unraveling of faith, family, fellowship, everything. I'm out. I'm working 2 jobs and not very well because my emotional state was just pretty shattered.
Yeah.
I lost my God. I thought my framework of my mindset of clarity. I'm running into a world that I'm not so familiar with now, a secular world, because I'd been mostly in a Christian world. And nothing seemed to be right. And so I went from, kind of like my mother, I kind of drifted from job to job, trying to figure myself out. This is funny. I was off and on in touch with my father, the shadow figure on the periphery of my life. I called him up one day. I called him and I said, Dad, you've been all over the world. You've done all kinds of things. Yep, I have. I said, I'm in this place in my life now. I'm like 33 and I don't know what to do with myself. And he said, I'll tell you what. He said, you go somewhere nobody want to go. You do something nobody want to do. You have yourself a job. This is a guy that didn't finish the 8th grade, but had the simplicity of country wisdom. And that's what he'd done. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. He was very monocular in his life focus, and he would simply go and do the job.